Hi, this is David Mastio, California editor for the Center Square, and this is California in Focus. As always, I'm joined by Kenneth Schrupp, the California reporter for the Center Square. Today, we're talking about California's budget deficit. Kenneth, is it bigger or smaller?
Well, the budget deficit is probably going to get a lot bigger this year. The California Legislative Analyst Office, which is a non-partisan, state-funded think group at the government, is a state watchdog, estimates the deficit will probably be $73 billion for the 2024-2025 fiscal year due to declining tax revenues, especially in personal income tax.
And what does the governor say the deficit is going to be?
Well, the governor tells people to stop using this fake news, these fake numbers, and he's saying it's only going to be $37.8 billion. But it does not appear likely that his optimistic scenario for the deficit will be reality.
So what does the governor propose we do about even his smaller deficit?
The governor did propose cutting a few $1 billion in spending. I think it was something about $8 billion in spending, but that doesn't really cut it. Most of what he also tried to do was shift funds around in budget gimmicks. For example, the University of California system receives a few $100 million a year. Instead of giving it to them, he would allow them to take loans on the money that they're supposed to get from someone else for when they actually do get the money next year. He's proposing shifting one of the pay periods to the next year so that the payroll goes on to next year's budget instead of this year's budget. These are all some really small gimmicks that you can do that don't actually change the fundamental problem of state spending has doubled in the last several years, and yet revenues have not. So, of course, you're going to run into a deficit.
Have Republicans made any proposals on how to cut the deficit?
There's no specific spending reduction that has been pointed out. I think there's a broad understanding that Democrats have gotten themselves into the hole, and because you need so many Democrats to actually vote on anything, Republicans are in a super minority, that it could be better to let Democrats work out their own problems because there's not a hell of a lot Republicans can do about it. One thing that has been proposed by Republicans that I think would make a big difference is including interest costs in new bond measures. If you go to the proposition guide or you go to the ballot box and you look at how much a bond is going to cost, it tells you the principle that they're going to take out. Let's just use Proposition 1, this new ballot measure to build outpatient mental health spots, mental health wards, and some homelessness housing. It's advertised as a $6.4 billion bond, but on the guide or the voter ballot, it says the bond will cost $300 million per year over 30 years. So that's about $2.9 billion in interest that cost is assumed to be, but that's not included anywhere. Or it also doesn't even include that the total cost is expected to be $9.3 billion. What's even worse about this, though, is that this estimate doesn't really include an accurate estimate on what interest payments will be, because this $2.9 billion interest cost is based on a 1.51% interest rate, which the state is not paying on its debt. Proposition 1 would take out a general obligation bond, and for the most recent general obligation bond issuance of $682 million, the state was paying out 3.28% and 3.29%, roughly split between two bidding groups. So if you assume a rate of 3.285%, or the average of the two rates, Proposition 1 is going to cost $6.31 billion in interest, which is about the original cost of what the principal will be. So if voters are realizing, oh wait, the cost of the bond is actually going to be double whatever it is that we take out, there's a chance a lot of them will start to vote no on these things.
And California is continuing to spend at an incredible rate, even as these deficits face the state. One example that pops into mind is that the state's going to spend $2 billion on EV chargers.
Right. The state wants to build 40,000 EV chargers compared to just the 10,000 it has and spend $2 billion to do so. The problem, though, is that EV sales are in decline because it seems like people are getting a little sick of them. The range is not great. Repairing them is really expensive. The batteries degrade a lot faster than expected. You're not getting these reduced maintenance costs that we're supposed to get from having less moving parts. Instead, you have fewer available parts because there just aren't enough spare parts available. You have everything loaded with sensors, so you can't have a standard mechanic go fix anything. You got to go to a specialist who has all of this diagnostic equipment and can install these computer chips and everything and make the whole systems work again, which means that you spend months waiting for your car to get fixed. So people are getting really sick of these EV cars. EV sales fell 10% in the last quarter of 23 compared to the previous quarter, another 3% over the quarter before that. So we may be reaching the end of this sort of EV hype, which does mean that if we're spending billions of dollars on what's going to be obsolete infrastructure, because there's a generational leap in charging technology every 2 years or so. So if you're building infrastructure now, that's going to be useless 2 years from now, let alone 4, 6 years from now. It's just money flushed down the drain. And two, we just can't really afford this. I do want to point out to another program in California that we probably don't even know how much this is going to cost. We expanded Medi-Cal, or the taxpayer-financed healthcare program, to cover all illegal immigrants. And this is expected to cost $3.4 billion this year, based on us having only 700,000 new illegal immigrants sign up for it. But as we've seen with the Texas border being shut down, migrant flows are being redirected to California. So how many more people are we going to sign up for this program? It seems like we're allocating, roughly a few $1,000s per illegal immigrant who comes into this state to sign up for Medi-Cal. So if the number of immigrants is much higher than expected, so will the cost of Medi-Cal.
I'm David Mastio with the Center Square, and we've been talking with Kenneth Schrupp, California reporter for the Center Square. You can read his work at thecentersquare.com. Thank you for listening to California in Focus, and please subscribe to our podcast.
Learn from creative experts. At Skillshare, classes are taught by industry leaders excited to share their tools, techniques, and professional journeys with you. Follow the link in our show description to join Skillshare today and get 1 month free.